So for those of you who follow me on Twitter and Periscope, I had mentioned that in addition to my videos as part of the Road to Civil War, I would also continue my series on the Marvel power hierarchy. At the same time, I had asked you all to post questions in the comments section of the second video on things you needed more clarification for as they pertain to this topic, and because there were 400 different replies, I've spent a part of the last couple weeks combing over all of them. And so I'm hoping that this video will provide the clarity you guys are looking for, as well as allow us to move forward with the rest of this topic. The first and most common question asked was whether or not the cosmic entities of Marvel Comics still exist in the all-new, all-different Marvel Universe. The answer to this question is yes, and is teased in two sources, but confirmed in a third. The first two sources come in the form of all-new, all-different Starbrand and Nightmask, and all-new, all-different Ultimates. Regarding Starbrand and Nightmask, because both of these heroes serve as harbingers of the universe in order to keep it protected from various threats, much like the Silver Surfer, their escapades within the first 5 issues saw them traveling into space itself, as well as dealing with the cosmic Marvel landscape. As a result, and while it's only momentary, issue number 3 established that Eternity was present in the all-new, all-different Marvel Universe, and maintained its previous position prior to the events of Secret Wars, and that Eternity exists as the physical manifestation of the universe, and came into existence with the creation of the Marvel Prime Universe itself. Now regarding the all-new, all-different Ultimates, as a group composed of Black Panther, Blue Marvel, and others, who serve to protect the Marvel Prime Universe from multiversal threats, the first issue saw the return of Galactus as the Devourer of Worlds, who was transformed into the Lifebringer due to the Ultimates' efforts in curing his hunger. Now for the definitive answer to our question, this comes with Jim Starlin's graphic novel, Infinity Finale. Now while the graphic novel does take place within its own self-contained universe outside of the Marvel Prime continuity, and focus on the actions of a nihilist from the Negative Zone looking to take over that reality, at the conclusion of the story, Jim Starlin tied the events into the post-Secret Wars universe, as well as the greater Marvel cosmology. In the final events of the story following the defeat of Annihilus, Thanos and Adam Warlock were brought before the One Above All, who made the case that with the original Living Tribunal having been killed during the events leading up to Time Runs Out, a new tribunal would need to be appointed to take its place and ensure balance was maintained throughout the multiverse. Now where Starlin does not address why the One Above All took no action against the Beyonders during their crusade to wipe everything out, as part of the bargain to restore that reality, Adam Warlock had undertaken the position as the new Living Tribunal. In addition to this, the traditional cosmic entities from the pre-Secret Wars era, including Eternity and Infinity, had referenced the death of the previous Living Tribunal and the events that led into Secret Wars. That said, the next question I saw being asked frequently was in relation to the Phoenix Force, Doctor Strange, and beings from other dimensions. Now where these were characters that I intended to cover in a separate video due to there being different versions of them with each depiction having varying levels of power, because this was so popular, we'll go ahead and we'll just cover it right here. So starting with the Phoenix Force, this entity exists in 3 forms: the normal Phoenix, the Dark Phoenix, and the White Phoenix of the Crown. The normal Phoenix is the version of Jean Grey seen during the original Phoenix saga, as well as the form taken by Rachel Summers and Hope Summers. In this form, the powers of these characters are amplified several times over, and their capabilities allow them to exceed the Celestials, placing them just under Eternity in terms of power. As for the Dark Phoenix, this version is more powerful than the standard Phoenix Force due to the removal of its moral compass, although this form still remains weaker than Eternity. Now for the White Phoenix of the Crown, this version actually steps into the true purpose of the Phoenix and has only been attained by Jean Grey and Hope Summers, with Hope having only been the White Phoenix of the Crown for a few minutes. In this form, the White Phoenix is elevated from being a universal entity to a multiversal entity and exists to literally travel into universes and eliminate what doesn't work. Now where this is extremely ambiguous, its meaning is a little lackluster in that this explanation basically just allows Marvel to have the White Phoenix do whatever they want her to do. And that's it. There's really nothing more to it than that, so I'm sorry for you guys who were hoping for a deeper meaning here, but there isn't one. It's just a plot device. So transitioning to Doctor Strange, much like the Beyonder and Owen Reese, Strange exists in two forms, pre-retcon and post-retcon. However, while Beyonder and Owen Reese had clear-cut reductions to their powers in a single story, Doctor Strange was not this way. Instead, the reduction of his abilities came over the course of a decade or so as different writers used different stories to make his character more relatable as opposed to being wildly overpowered. Now, there was a particular moment whereby Doctor Strange actually had his powers taken away from him by the Vishanti, but while they were returned, this is kind of considered to be the tipping point, whereby if his powers were being reduced over the course of decades, this was a straw that broke the camel's back that basically put his abilities in a place where there was no going back to the way they used to be before. In terms of pre-retcon Doctor Strange, his character was quite literally able to do everything, including astral projection, cosmic awareness, dimensional travel and manipulation, flight, control over the elements, instantaneous healing, the ability to return people from the dead, telepathy, telekinesis, time travel, and teleportation. Basically, it was one of these things that if you can think of it, there was a spell somewhere that he could use to make it happen. And so the result was that the original powers of Doctor Strange placed him above the cosmic entities, but below the living tribunal in terms of power. However, following the various reductions of these abilities, the powers of Doctor Strange made him much weaker, resulting in him being on par with the various cosmic entities, or a little weaker than them. Now, for other dimensional beings, the issue with quantifying these characters is that they have never really had any contact with the mainstream Marvel Universe, minus the Skyfathers and the Olympians. Instead, the measure of their power comes in the form of Earthbound characters referencing these powers directly. As an example, the most powerful of these beings and the arch-nemesis of Doctor Strange comes in the form of Dormammu. While he has never actually entered the mainstream Marvel Universe, in Amazing Spider-Man number 58 from 2003, Doctor Strange had made the case that if Dormammu were to ever enter the mainstream Marvel Universe, his power would extend into the multiverse, with no one, not even the Living Tribunal, being able to stand against him. Now, for the rest of the other dimensional beings, including Sidorak, Icon, Shumagorath, Ragador, Watum, and the Vishanti, where they are largely viewed in the same capacity as Dormammu in terms of their abilities, on the whole, I would consider these beings on par with the Living Tribunal. This pertains to the Vishanti especially due to the fact that the bulk of Doctor Strange's powers, both pre- and post-retcon, hail from the Vishanti themselves, indicating that their power is seemingly limitless. Now, for those of you who are curious about the source of Doctor Strange's powers, we'll actually get into that a little further as we get closer to the release of his film. But at this point, I want to continue on with our discussion by branching into several other characters who rank under the Marvel cosmic entities in terms of their power, but are also part of this overarching question about other dimensional beings. Looking to Rune King Thor, Odin, Surtur, Zeus, and Mephisto, these beings each exist within their own pocket dimensions and routinely cross over with characters from Earth. To sidetrack here for a second, when it comes to pocket dimensions, the best way to understand this is that if a house is the main Marvel universe, the various closets represent pocket dimensions which can be accessed through different dimensional portals like the Bifrost or simply sheer force of will. Regarding Rune King Thor, during the Ragnarok event which had seen the death of Odin as part of its lead-up, Thor had undertaken a sacred journey which endowed him with the Odin Force and the power of Asgard's ancient runes, which endowed him with godlike abilities. Now, there is some debate among comic readers as to whether or not Rune King Thor could take out a single Celestial, but because his powers exist in isolation and that he never encountered Odin or battled a Celestial and only appeared in 3 issues, it's impossible for us to know for sure. But in my mind, because Odin was destroyed by a single Celestial despite using the full power of the Odin Force and the Destroyer armor, it would stand to reason that Rune King Thor would not fare any better. Now, if you want to learn more about Rune King Thor, I have a video explaining this in more detail. But transitioning to Surtur, he hails from the realm of the fire demons called Muspelheim and is the arch-nemesis of Odin. As such, his powers are relatively limited in number in that they consist of superhuman strength, endurance, longevity, dimensional travel, and magic, but exist on such a scale that he's virtually impossible to kill with the exception of those listed above or equal to him in power. In terms of Odin, his power hails from the Odin Force, which is more of an amalgamation of energies. Originating with Odin absorbing the life energies of his brothers Vili and V, the Odin Force is almost limitless in its capabilities. The downside here is that because it serves as the source of Odin's energy, much like a battery, if Odin uses too much of this power at one time, he enters something called the Odin sleep, which allows him to recharge the Odin force. Now for Zeus, he exists as the Olympian equivalent of Odin, but where Odin uses the Odin force to power himself, Zeus and the rest of the Olympians are powered by humanity's belief in them. In addition to this, Zeus is able to magnify and amplify his own power set and reduce the abilities of other parts of his powers, meaning he can increase his strength by sacrificing a portion of his speed and durability or any combination of the three. As a result, in terms of overall power, Zeus and Odin are largely considered to be the two most powerful of the Skyfathers, a belief that was held by comics fans for years, but confirmed in 2014's Thanos Annual Number 1. Now transitioning to the Skyfathers themselves, these beings represent the traditional gods of various historical cultures on Earth, including but not limited to Odin, Zeus, Vishnu, and Osiris. Now while we haven't seen the true power of each of these beings outside of Odin and Zeus, there have been a couple of instances when the collective abilities of the Skyfathers have proved formidable. As an example, because the Celestials had engineered the Deviants, Eternals, and Mutants, the decision was made that the group would travel to Earth every 1,000 years or so and investigate their efforts. To this end, when the third celestial host arrived over 1,000 years ago, the Skyfathers were forced to remain hands-off after the Celestials had threatened to seal the barriers between the pocket dimensions of the Skyfathers and Earth. And so while they did allow this to happen, when the fourth celestial host had arrived in the modern day, Odin drew the life energies of all the Asgardians except for Thor into himself, entered the Destroyer armor, and alongside the Skyfathers, engaged in battle with the Celestials. Now while the group was defeated almost immediately, the power they possessed was enough to at least receive acknowledgement of worthiness from the Celestials themselves. Something to also note here is that regarding Doctor Strange, while pre-retcon Doctor Strange was far beyond the Skyfathers, post-retcon Doctor Strange was far weaker than the Skyfathers. Finally, regarding Mephisto, like the Skyfathers, he exists within the realm of his own pocket dimension similar to Hell, but populated by those who swore fealty to him in exchange for earthly pleasures. To this end, while Mephisto can enter the realm of Earth, his power begins to decrease the longer he stays away from his dimension. However, in terms of his abilities, his powers are energized by the evil of the Marvel Universe and include godly intelligence, immortality, and magic, which enable him to achieve virtually any effect he desires, including shape and size manipulation, illusion projection, and time manipulation, allowing him to stand as one of the cosmic entities but on a lower level, placing him equal to the Skyfathers, but weaker than the Celestials. With that being said, we're going to bring this video to an end, and I hope it answered some of the questions you guys had. As always, feel free to post questions down in the comment section, and I'll answer them as best I can. And yeah, so I will catch you guys later. Peace.